Hello, today we're going to start off learning about loops. Loops are a set of instructions that the computer runs repeatedly until a condition is met. That's the base definition of a loop. That's what we're going to be learning about today. There are many different types of loops. Right here they all are. So types of loops, the for, the generic, and numerical, while, and repeat. These are the fundamentals that we're going to be learning about today. So let's start off learning the while loop. We're going to start learning the while loop. A while loop checks its condition before it runs its code. So as an example, let's make a condition. Local condition equals, we'll just set the true for now. So the condition is true. Now let's make our while loop. While condition do. So while this condition is true, or truly, it'll run this code, and this is the set of instructions. So here's the setup, the syntax, here's the condition, and here's the instructions. Some loops have an incrementer, like a for loop, but a while loop doesn't. We could give it one, but it's not necessary. We'd rather use a for loop rather than a while loop if we want to do that. So like I said before, the condition has to be truly, but that doesn't mean it has to be true. Let's say 1. This would still run because 1 isn't falsy, it's truly. Any value that's not nil or false will be counted as truly. Let's move on to the next loop, and that's going to be the repeat loop. Alright, we're looking at the repeat loop next because it's basically the same thing, except the repeat loop checks its condition last. So a repeat loop checks its condition last, and that can be useful. The repeat loop and the while loop are pretty, like, you can use one over the other in some cases, in a lot of cases actually, but the repeat loop is an easier way of checking the condition last other than using a while loop. So syntax, repeat, oops, and then condition. I can spell condition right. And then here's the instructions. And obviously, condition can be anything that's truly, or anything at all. In fact, it could even be time. Well, it can be anything, but as an example, this is the start, and condition minus tick is greater than 2. We have to wait or else it'll freeze our game, but this will run for 2 seconds until this condition is met, which is just a time. Actually, I did that wrong, didn't I? This would be tick minus condition, because condition would be lower than tick. Anyways, that is an example. Let's move on to the next loop, which is the for loop. So a numerical for loop might be a little bit more complicated for the beginner because its condition isn't quite as easy to grasp, but here's the syntax: for and then do. And then here's where we put the condition. But the condition isn't true or false. It's a bit more complicated. So we start off with any variable. This is our variable. So a lot of people use I for index. And then it equals, this is where the number starts off with. We can make it 3, we can make it whatever. I'll go with 1. And then we set the number it stops at, so 10. So this loops 10 times. What Lua does is each loop, it starts off with this, then it makes I equal to I plus this. But this isn't necessary. This is just started off at 1 anyway, so plus that. By default, this number is 1, but you can make it whatever you want. You can make it 2, and this would loop 5 times, going in increments from 2. So if we were to print I here, I'll run this in the command bar, even though it might be hard to see for you guys. I'm not sure if you can see it, but the output is 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10 from the for loop. And you can also count down. You can count in decimals, so 0 to 1, 0.01. This would loop 100 times, going all the way from 0 to 100. From 0 to 1 in increments from 0.1, 0.01, which is a little bit more hard to grasp, but hopefully you understand it enough to just use it. If you use it, the more you use it, the better you'll get at it, and that's important. Alright, moving on to generic for loop. Moving on to generic for loops. Generic for loop is simply put as I can, a loop that loops through elements of a table or an array. So the syntax is actually the same, well, for the most part anyways, as for loop, numeric for loop. So for and do end, but the condition is a lot more complicated. So first of all, there's 2 variables that you have to put. Well, you don't have to put these. You can put just 1 if you want to. But we're going to go ahead and use I and V for index and value equals. Oh, actually not equals, sorry. For IV in pairs, then TV. There are multiple ways of doing this. There's also I pairs, and there's also next. These function slightly differently, but for the most part you won't notice any difference. So for our purposes, we're going to use pairs, so that's normal to do. All this will do is loop through all the elements of the table. This will loop 3 times, and I will equal the index. So if it's love, that's 1, and if it's hate, that's 2, and then 3 for communicate. Love, hate, and communicate. The V is actually the value, so V would be love, hate, and then communicate, which is fantastic. Normally, if you didn't want to use these variables, you would, for example, if you didn't want to use any of these, you would just put that. If you didn't want to use the I, you just only want to use the values. You'd use this. But normally, you also want to put whatever. Actual variable names that aren't like crappy. A single variable name is bad because it's really crappy and no one can understand it. But V is just common. This will just loop through everything in the table, get it, and print it. With dictionaries, it's a little bit different. There, love equals communication, and what should hate equal? I spelled communication wrong. I'm going to put grass. Alright. In this case, this will be KV. So this is what some people put because K is the key. So K would equal love, and then next it would equal hate. But the value of the key would equal communication, and then it would equal grass next, because that's the next value of the next key. Also, before I forget, just to let you know, an actual use of the pairs loop or the generic for loop is getting things from objects and looping through them and actually doing stuff with them. So inside Workspace, I have a full model, parts, a whole bunch of parts right here, and we loop through them here. So here's the table. Workspace got parts, get children, and then we loop through them to the table, and I actually use proper variable names. So part brick color equals brick color dot random. That'll make the brick colors random, and if we press play here, eventually these will all turn into a random color when the game starts. And as you can see, they're all a random color. And that's going to be it. Thanks for watching, like I said.